All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on the overview of the expanded outdoor dining permit for bars and restaurants. My name is Isaac Reichman. I am the Director of Public Information for the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, and I'll be providing today's webinar. Joining me on today's webinar, either already on or will be on soon, are representatives from the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, the Department of Transportation, and the liquor licensing team here at the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. And they will be helping answer questions over the course of this webinar related to the expanded outdoor dining permit for bars and restaurants. Great. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Part of the intention of this webinar is to provide an opportunity to answer questions. As I said, there are panelists from other departments that can help answer questions as well, in addition to myself. And we ask that you please, if you have any questions, to please use the chat bar, the chat function on this webinar. That's the easiest way to submit your questions and to have them be answered. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible that do come through. But I've also included our general BACP email at the bottom of every page. There may be that some questions we either do not get to or are unable to answer during this webinar for whatever reason. Perhaps if there's specific questions about specific permits that we will need to look up. I'll ask that you please submit those questions to the BACP outreach email, or there'll be some other email addresses that I'll share throughout for specific questions. So again, please submit any questions you have during the webinar to the chat function. And if your question is not answered, please submit it via email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Another point of housekeeping, this webinar will be recorded and we will be posting it on our website hopefully by tomorrow. And that'll be at the same website. I'll type it into the chat right now. That's the same website that you used in order to access today's webinar, chicago.gov/businessworkshops. We will also be holding this same webinar tomorrow, Thursday, August 6th at 2 p.m. In case any of your colleagues were unable to make it to today's webinar, they can attend that, or if there are any questions, anything you want clarification on that you missed from today's, you can join. It will be the same content tomorrow. It is not going to be a new presentation. It will be the same content tomorrow. So again, this webinar will be recorded. Great. So I will get started. Here's the agenda for today. I'll provide a quick update on the data, on the COVID-19 data. I'm going to review the industry guidelines for restaurants and bars. I know many of you folks may hopefully already do know these guidelines, but I think it's really important to review them. I'm going to spend the bulk of the time talking about the expanded outdoor dining permit. Then we'll have some time for questions. Depending on how the webinar goes, I may pause for questions at some other times over the course of the webinar as well, but we'll definitely have time at the end for questions. And again, we'll have representatives from other departments on as well. I'll point you, before I get into this, I'll point you specifically, if you haven't visited it already, to visit chicago.gov/reopening. That's your best source for everything related to reopening and the industry guidelines under COVID-19. Again, though, the focus of today's webinar, while I will provide an update on an overview of the industry guidelines, and we'll provide a data update, the focus is on that expanded outdoor dining permit, specifically on the announcement and the expansion of that program that we made just this past Friday to expand opportunities specifically for establishments that do not serve alcohol, or sorry, that do not serve food. So I will spend the bulk of today's presentation on that. But before we get started, I did want to provide an update on the COVID-19 data, and I also recommend that you all visit chai.gov/COVID- If you have not visited that website, I recommend that you bookmark it, visit it every day. This is the best place to find the most up-to-date data for Chicago, specifically as it relates to COVID-19. I also recommend listening and following the Department of Public Health, particularly Dr. Arity's Facebook Live. She goes on Facebook Live now 2 days a week to provide a detailed update on the data, to answer questions, things like that, and to answer a number of questions that are probably very relevant and important to a number of businesses right now. You know, we are the business regulators here at BACP, so we can answer a lot of questions related to what the rules are and how to follow those rules. But the health department and our health experts led by Dr. Arity, they're the experts on the why behind these rules and what else businesses and residents need to know in order to stay safe. So as you can see on this data here, our cases in the city have gone up. Our confirmed cases per day, 7-day rolling average as of last Thursday, July 30th, is at 277. Now, we moved to phase 4 because we were under 200 cases a day. We actually went down to about 160 cases per day at our best point. But we've now almost doubled that to almost 300 cases per day, and those numbers do continue to rise, which is obviously concerning. We certainly are concerned as these cases are going up. So as you can see on this graph, we are nowhere near our peak back in May, but since we began reopening around June 3rd, we have seen the cases slowly but assuredly rising. And again, we got down to a low of about 160 per day, but we're back up to most recent 7-day rolling average we have of 277 cases per day. Now, one important point, and a point that the health commissioner has made, is while this is concerning, our cases are not rising as much in Chicago as they are in some other counties around the state, or as they are in some neighboring states. So there are good signs, but overall not a great sign that cases are going up like this, which is why, as you know, we've had to take some measures over the last few weeks. One thing I want to say, you know, as a representative of the regulatory department that's regulating businesses, you know, we have seen a good deal of compliance from businesses throughout the city of Chicago. So I want to thank all of you for your efforts on this. Again, before getting into the specifics on the expanded outdoor dining permit, I wanted to take a few minutes to remind everyone on the call of the guidelines for food services and bars. I think it's always worth reminding folks about these guidelines to make sure that they are top of mind and that everybody is being very proactive about following these guidelines. And again, as a reminder, not following these will and can lead to enforcement, including citations and potentially closure orders as well. That is something that we have done. So first, social distancing, ensuring 6 feet between individuals and close choke points for restaurants and bars. That means spacing tables 6 feet apart, whether they are inside or outside. Decommissioning tables are adding physical barriers in places where they cannot be moved. And other places any place really where social distancing is not possible, you should be having some sort of impermeable barrier. Like, for example, if you have a place where people go to pay for their food or their drinks. Any areas where people are queuing should be set up with appropriate physical distancing guidelines. And you'll see highlighted in red, these are the key changes that came into effect a couple weeks ago in response to the rise in cases. So table capacity should be limited to no more than 6 people. This is inside or outside, whether you're serving food and drinks or just food or just drinks. Table capacity is limited to no more than 6 people. And highlighted in red, key change, indoor service is permitted at establishments that serve food only. So any establishment, any liquor only establishment that does not have a retail food license cannot be open for indoor service. And any establishment that can be open for indoor service is limited to 50 individuals or 25% capacity, whichever is fewer for each room or space. Now, a little bit more about indoor versus outdoor service. So establishments that do not serve food, that serve alcohol only, are permitted to be open outdoors. Outdoors is basically, our definition of outdoors is what it was back in phase 3. This means in the sidewalk, on the street, in potential street closures, patios, rooftops, also any room that has a retractable roof. And additionally, under outdoor service, we do include those spaces that are within 8 feet, tables that are within 8 feet of a wall that can be open at least 50%. So if you have large windows that can open up or panels that can be removed so that you can be basically have a wall open more than 50%, then you can have tables within 8 feet of that, even if you do not serve food, because we are considering that outdoor space. Protective gear should be worn by all employees and customers. This is something that we have and will continue to issue citations about. Really critically, all employees should be wearing face coverings. These should be over your nose and your mouth, not just your mouth. And the only times they can be removed are while customers are seated and eating or drinking. Apologize, that should say seated and eating or drinking. So if customers are seated and eating or drinking, they can remove their face coverings. You know, we've shown up at establishments where there's been a number of people walking around, standing at bars without face coverings on. That's an immediate and easy citation. Hand sanitizer or hand washing facilities must be readily available for both customer and employee use. And you should be providing a health and safety training to your employees. You should be having screening measures for employees and customers. So this is the minimum requirement. Employees should not report to work or be allowed to remain at work if they're exhibiting symptoms or report that they are feeling ill. So at minimum, you should be making sure that employees do a self-screen to check to make sure that they do not have any symptoms. You certainly can, and we encourage more than that. You can have a temperature check. You can have questions that you ask folks when they arrive to work. You should also be posting a pledge upon the entrance or, again, conducting a screening to verify that customers or anyone else that is entering your facility is not exhibiting COVID-19. Now, if you want language for what that pledge might look like, feel free to send us an email, BACP Outreach, and we will get you that. You should be, this hopefully should go without saying, but thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing your entire facility prior to opening and throughout the day. Disposable table items are encouraged. If you do not have disposable table items, you should be cleaning and sanitizing those items. You should have signage posted around the establishment. Social distancing, wearing face coverings, things like that. And similar, you should have some sort of agreement for anyone who's entering that they do not have symptoms. Modify workplace conditions to minimize interactions. So this first thing is critical. All patrons must be seated. Whether they are inside or outside, they must be seated while they are eating and drinking. That is something that we have and will continue to issue citations about. Again, we show up and we see 12 people standing around a bar eating and drinking. That is not okay. You can have your bar open, provided it follows all the other rules, if you can maintain 6 feet of social distancing. That means, you know, if you have 2 people that come together for the same party, they can sit next to each other at the bar, but there needs to be 6 feet between them and other customers. But again, if you are alcohol only, you can't have your indoor bar open unless you happen to have a bar that is within 8 feet of those open windows. So that is something, that bullet point there is something that is very, very important that we certainly have been and will continue to issue citations about. We do not want to see people mingling about eating and drinking while standing, because that leads to the congregating that we're really trying to avoid. Cafeterias, buffets, other self-serve food stations can reopen, but they should be served by an employee. You should not be having a buffet where folks go up to get the food themselves, and that employee, or they can go up, but it needs to be served by the employee, and the employee must be wearing proper PPE. And then you should consider modifying your workplace conditions to promote social distancing. Last slide on the reopening guidelines before I get into a little bit more detail specific for outdoor service. You should be limiting in-person work where possible. If you have any trainings, consider doing them online, things like that. Limiting interactions between individuals. If you do not have a retail food license, seating is limited to 2 hours max. Still strongly encourage cashless or contactless ordering or payment, and still curbside takeout, carry out, and delivery. Even as you may be able to be open outside, a lot of folks have set out great curbside pickup. Still strongly encourage continuing that, and then strongly encourage reservations as well. You should be limiting travel for business. If you have multiple locations, you should be limiting it so employees are just working at one location. Finally, you should be following our health department and CDC guidance for testing and tracing protocols. We get a lot of questions about this. You should be prepared for what to do if an employee contracts COVID-19. Now, if someone contracts COVID-19, it is not immediate that that establishment needs to close by any means. The point of these guidelines are that if somebody does contract COVID-19, it will not, and if you're following all these guidelines closely, will not necessarily spread to other people at your establishment. But you also need to follow these strict guidelines for what to do when that happens, and you should be prepared for it. But it's not a requirement that you have to close because someone does have COVID-19. There's a series of CDC guidelines. It's also health department guidelines on cleaning and disinfecting the workplace, notifying other employees, things like that. Any employee that has had close contact with another person who has been diagnosed with COVID-19 should self-quarantine. And the health department is automatically notified and will begin contact tracing whenever a positive test happens. So it's not your responsibility to notify the health department if you have one positive test. That is automatically notified through the testing agency or center. But if you have 2 or more cases that are potentially associated with your establishment over a 2-week period, you should be reporting those to CDPH. And then they can help you make the decision about what you should be doing going forward. Right. Now, we've recovered these guidelines many times over the last couple of months, but please do let us know if you've had any questions related to these guidelines. Send us an email to BACP Outreach. I know there are some kind of nuanced gray area questions. We're happy to help you with those. Okay. Last thing regarding regulations before I get into the expanded outdoor dining permit, I want to remind everybody again, hopefully this is a reminder. I want to remind everyone on this webinar what the rules are related to alcohol sales. So liquor sales, alcohol sales for on-site consumption, if you are a bar or a restaurant or a tavern or brewery, does not matter. If you're selling alcohol for on-site consumption, that must end at 11 p.m. every day. So every night, alcohol sales must end at 11. And these establishments that sell alcohol for on-site consumption must close then at midnight each day. So stop selling alcohol at 11, close at midnight. Now, if you're a restaurant, you may stay open for delivery, carry out of food, things like that, but you cannot be open to the public after midnight each day. Liquor sales for off-site consumption must end at 9 p.m. every day. So if you're a bar or a restaurant that sells beer to go, wine to go, etc., that must end at 9 p.m. every day. Any other license activity may continue until the hours determined on your license or permit, or your midnight closure as if you sell on-site. Operators with a tavern or consumption on premises incidental activity may sell cocktails to go. However, you cannot sell anything that is for immediate consumption. So when we say cocktails to go, we mean cocktails sold in sealed and tamper-evident containers. You can't just take a cup and put a straw in it and sell that to go. It needs to be sealed and tamper-evident. Got a great question coming in regarding selling outside, and I did not specify, and I probably should have on this slide. These rules are in place whether it is inside or outside. So alcohol sales for on-site consumption, whether you are selling inside or outside, must end at 11 p.m. The difference is whether people are taking it to go or whether they are drinking it there. If they're drinking it there, whether inside or outside, it must end at 11 p.m. If they're taking it to go, it must end at 9 p.m. And regardless, your whole place needs to close at midnight. Great, now I'm gonna, and again, this is the focus of today's webinar. I wanted to provide that context though before getting into it. Today is all about outdoor options. What are the regulations? How do you get outside, particularly for establishments that sell alcohol without a retail food license? First, I'm going to provide an overview of all of the different outdoor options. So again, establishments that sell alcohol only and do not have a retail food license can no longer operate indoors. They can, however, operate outdoors under these specific guidelines. Additionally, even if you are a restaurant, even if you do serve food, while you can be open indoors, you are limited in your capacity, 25% or 50 people, whichever is fewer. And the health department has made it very, very clear. Across the board, it is always safer to be outside, always safer to be outside. So if you do not have outdoor options and are interested in outdoor options, whether you're a bar, tavern, restaurant, brewery, please pay attention to these guidelines here. First, what counts under outdoors? Rooms with retractable roofs and indoor spaces near windows with 50% of the wall open. You do not need any additional permit or license required. If you already have a licensed establishment and you have indoor spaces that are near open windows that are over 50% of the wall, you do not need any additional license, or if you have a room with a retractable roof. Now, if you want to operate a rooftop or a permanent outdoor patio, something that you want to operate permanently, then you will need an outdoor patio license from BACP if you're serving alcohol. If you're not serving alcohol and you have a retail food establishment license, you don't need any additional license from BACP in order to operate on an outdoor patio. The requirement, though, is that your patio is covered by that square footage of that retail food establishment license. So this is, again, rooftops or permanent outdoor patios. So if you have a permanent location that you want to bring in and turn into a permanent courtyard, a permanent patio that is always and into the future part of your establishment, then you'll need an outdoor patio license if you're serving alcohol. Now, if you want to operate on the sidewalk, there are two different options now. If you are a retail food establishment, if you have a retail food establishment license from BACP, then you should be getting the sidewalk cafe permit. So if you have a retail food establishment license, there's already a way to get on the sidewalk, and that is still going to be the way to get on the sidewalk, a sidewalk cafe permit. Now, the new announcement last week is that establishments without a retail food establishment license, so bars, taverns that have a liquor license, a tavern license, but no retail food establishment license, they can now apply to operate on the sidewalk. And you would use the expanded outdoor dining permit. And that's the focus of today's presentation. I'm going to talk about the process for applying for that. So again, expanded outdoor dining permit can be used for liquor-only establishments to operate on the sidewalk. Finally, if you want to operate on the street and or private property, temporarily, you can use the expanded outdoor dining permit. So if you want to close the street, and we'll talk about this in just a second, or operate on private property, or a temporary, so let's say you have a patio and you want to temporarily expand into that patio just during this COVID times, then you can use the expanded outdoor dining permit. So the other change as of last Friday is previously we have said if it's a patio, if it's a courtyard, you need to get the outdoor patio license. Now we are giving you this option of using the expanded outdoor dining permit, which has less regulatory hoops to jump through and hopefully can get you outdoors. So I'm going to talk about the expanded outdoor dining permit now in more detail, and I'm going to cover the three different options. I see a couple questions come through. Hopefully I will be able to answer those questions over the course of this presentation. Otherwise, I will answer them at the end or have some of my colleagues from other departments here help with those questions. So the expanded outdoor dining permit, this is a temporary permit created specifically for operating outside during COVID-19. It's issued by the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, CDOT, the Department of Transportation, and BACP. It's an unprecedented situation where we have brought these departments together to get these out the door as quickly as possible. There's three different options for using the expanded outdoor dining permit. First, there's the option for street closure or use of public property for multiple bars and restaurants participating. This we've had, I believe, over 20 of these, either on sidewalk space, public courtyards, or with actual street closure around the city. This must be applied for by chambers, SSAs, business service organizations, or three or more establishments applying together. So one establishment itself cannot close the street. You must be applying ideally through one of these organizations or as three or more establishments applying together. So that's the first option. I'll talk about that in a little more detail in the next slide. The second option is to temporarily operate in private property. So you have your own parking lot, you have your own backyard space that has a nice potential space, you have a courtyard, a patio, and you want to temporarily expand your own operations as an individual bar or restaurant into that area. Parking lots, or in red, because this is new, areas that are typically outdoor patios. That is another way you can use the expanded outdoor dining permit. So for you, the bar, you, the restaurant, you, the brewery, to expand into your own private property. Third, and this is a new option again as of Friday, individual liquor-only establishments can apply to operate in sidewalk space immediately in front of the establishment. So again, this used to only be open to retail food establishments through the Sidewalk Cafe permit. Now, an establishment that serves liquor only can apply through the expanded outdoor dining permit to operate in sidewalk space immediately in front of their establishment. Now I'm going to go through all three of these options in a little more detail. As I said, let me talk about an overview, a little bit more just about the general permit before jumping into all three of those options in a little bit more detail. There is no permit fee. However, if you are serving liquor, there will be a temporary liquor license fee for this permit. And the permit is for a term of 180 days. As I said, the program is overseen by three departments, all of whom are on the line today to help answer questions. That's DCASE, Cultural Affairs and Special Events, BACP, Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, my department, and then Transportation. Applications are reviewed by these three departments for safe and responsible operation. We also take into account input from the fire department, police department, and the local alderman in reviewing these permits. So the fire department is consulted with in depending on the safety of the specific plan. Police department, the local commander, and the local alderman is notified for every one of these permits. Great. So now, as I said, I'm going to talk about the great question. Can you actually take a pause? That's a great question. Can you expand upon the liquor fees? And Brian, are you on from the liquor team? I am unmuting you now. Brian, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear
Brian,
you, but
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Brian,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. The liquor fees, there's a state of Illinois special use permit that you're going to have to get, and that's $150. And there is a City of Chicago special event liquor license that is also $150. Those are the only two fees for the expanded outdoor dining permit. In addition, you know, the expanded outdoor dining is free, and then the two liquor fees are $150 each.
Great. Great, thank you, Brian. And that's my apologies. I had my computer on mute, so I did not hear Brian right away. So thank you so much, Brian. And again, Brian is on, and he can help answer liquor questions as they come through. Then we also have representatives from CDOT and DCASE as we get a little bit more into this as well. So a little bit more about the first option here. For street closure. So this, again, I'm going to talk about the three different options for the expanded outdoor dining permit. The first is street closure. For this option, applications must be submitted by chambers, SSAs, business service organizations, or 3 or more establishments. If you are at least 50% of the participating establishments must serve food. So a bar or tavern or brewery can participate even if they do not provide food themselves. However, they need to, at least 50% of the establishments participating in the program must serve food. And these applications are very much reviewed on a case-by-case basis because every street, every piece of public way that could potentially be included is very different. So they're all reviewed on a case-by-case basis for hours of operation, the size of street closure, etc. The applicant is responsible for type 3 barricades in case of street closure. And if you as a restaurant and bar have any questions, want to learn more about a chamber or business service organization, you can do so at chicago.gov/NBDC. A couple questions related to this. Jen Washington from DCASE is on. She oversees the permitting process from DCASE. One question: if a restaurant goes through the chamber or SSA for a street closure, what responsibilities, insurance, etc., does the chamber bear?
Either the chamber or the individual restaurants can provide the insurance needed by CDOT for the street closure.
Great, thank you, Jen. And then a question for Brian Knipper from BACP on liquor. Question about expediting these liquor permit processes, the special event liquor license permit process. Can you just talk a little bit about how quickly we're going through these and what the process is for those?
Well, the ideal is to get them done as quickly as possible, and we had targeted 5 days. Right now, there is an automatic notification that is going along with this, especially for the taverns that do not have food and are trying to use want to use the new expanded outdoor dining for the freedom to use, like the outdoor patio area and for the sidewalk. Those are being given, the aldermen are being given 72 hours with which to voice any objections that they would have. Then obviously we would target getting those out as soon as possible after those 72 hours have elapsed. Right now, like we said, we're shooting for 5 days. We have incorporated the state into what we're doing so that we notify the state as soon as we're at the point of sending the applicants their city approval and getting them to pay for their city license. We're also sending them the state authorization that they'll need for their state special use permit and copying the supervisor over at the state so that they can be expedited through them as well.
Great, thank you, Brian. Great. So I do see a couple questions come in that we will get to in just a minute. I had a question, and Jen, I'm not sure if this question is for you or if it is for Brian Gallardo, who is on from CDOT as well. How can we use, or can we use, our loading zone that is in front of our establishment, not just not a street closure, but just the loading zone? Is that something that can be possible under this?
Brian, you should speak to that one.
Brian, you're going in and out. Brian, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So at this time, that would be considered curb lane space, even if it's designated as a loading zone. So setting up in that area is not something that we have been allowing for tables to be set up in that curb lane space, unless we're talking about the few areas where there are full closures of the entire street.
Thank you, Brian. I see a couple additional questions come through that I think will be answered on the next couple slides. So again, that first option is for full street closure. The second option is for expanding into private property. So restaurants or bars can use the expanded outdoor dining permit to temporarily expand into private property, such as parking lots or areas that would typically require an outdoor patio license, such as patios or courtyards. Applications can be submitted by individual restaurants or bars for this. You do not need to have a group in this scenario. Establishments that do not serve food must identify a food partner so that a food is available during all hours of operation. So if you are a bar or a tavern or a brewery and you do not serve food, you must identify a food partner. Now, food partner, it does not mean that the food needs to be, cooked or brought in hot or anything like that. It just means that you have a partner, somebody that is available, that can bring food, can deliver food, to have food available to patrons. This can be a pizza place down the street that has access to that you can just have the menus out at your establishment. I know there are some services out there that can help bars partner with retail food establishments, partner with restaurants, so that it can actually be ordered directly from the liquor establishment. The important thing, though, is that you have to name for us the name of that retail food establishment. You cannot say Grubhub, DoorDash, something like that. It needs to be, you need to provide to us a name of a retail food establishment, and they need to have food available throughout your hours of operation. So if you're open till 11, the food should be available till 11. It should not be, just ends at 6 every day. Hours of operation for expanding into private property is 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. if you serve food, and 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. for liquor-only establishments. Now, there are additional license requirements that you may have. You may be under a plan of operations that tells you to close even earlier, or you may be, I know that there's specific Sunday rules as well for liquor establishments. But the general rules for the expanded outdoor dining permit, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. for establishments that serve food, 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. if you do not serve food. If liquor is being served, the private property must be connected to the establishment. We haven't denied a lot of these permits, but some of them have been denied because they are for private property down the street that is not connected to the establishment. So if you're serving liquor, the private property must be connected to the establishment. And this is something that we certainly handle on a case-by-case basis. So if you have any, if you have a specific question about your specific establishment, whether it would qualify as connected, please send us an email for that and we can help out there. A question come through: customers aren't required to order food. Yes, you are correct. Customers are not required to order food. However, food is required to be available under the expanded outdoor dining permit. So they're not required to order food, but food must be available. Right. Finally, I'm going to talk about the third and the new option for liquor-only establishments to expand onto the sidewalk. Liquor-only establishments can expand onto the sidewalk immediately in front of the establishment. So again, up until this change that came into effect just this past Friday, sidewalk operation was limited just to retail food establishments. Now establishments that have liquor only can use the expanded outdoor dining permit to operate in the sidewalk immediately in front of their establishment. Now, if you are a retail food establishment, we already have a process for this, and you should be using the sidewalk cafe permit. Liquor-only establishments that are using the expanded outdoor dining permit to operate on the sidewalk must, again, identify a food partner. Same rules as I just spoke about. Food must be available for patrons during all hours of operation. The sidewalk areas must leave a 6-foot clearance. So just like sidewalk cafes, it's really a lot of the same rules as existing sidewalk cafes. Per ADA rules, you must leave a 6-foot clearance. And barriers also must be erected around the seating area, and they must have something that's 27 inches high or less above the ground to provide for cane detection for people that are visually impaired. And there should be an entrance at least 3 to 5 feet wide. And hours of operation are limited to 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. for this. Couple questions related to this. Do places need to provide signage of the food partners? And do they need to communicate? Are there specific rules on communicating who the food partner is at the liquor establishment? So I'm going to read real quickly from the FAQ. You do need to have menus and or signage available directing customers to the online menu of your food partner that is available. So you need to either have menus available directly for customers to see and use, available for everyone, or signage directing them to the online menu. So yes, there does need to be some sort of signage, some sort of communicating. Right. This is a great question. And Jen, I believe I know the answer, but let me check with you here. Does the 6 feet of clearance have to be closest to the building, or can it be by the curb?
As long as there's 6 feet of pedestrian clearance, the positioning is up to the establishment.
Thank you, Jen. And then this is a question for Brian Gallardo from CDOT that came through. And I believe I know the answer as well, but there are some sidewalks around the city that do not have the ability to set up with 6 feet of clearance. Is there any opportunity for expanding across the whole sidewalk? Is that something that we could even look at on a case-by-case basis?
So that is something that we have been looking at on a case-by-case basis. We're still hammering out how that's going to work. So I won't say that it's not a possibility, but it's a little tricky. It depends on how you do it. It's probably going to depend on whether you serve food or not. Any establishments that serve food, if anything they're going to be doing on the sidewalk needs to go through the sidewalk cafe process, as you folks at BACP are aware. If we're talking liquor-only establishments, then it's a little bit different and will need to be handled through the expanded outdoor dining permits. But this is a new question to us that we're kind of working through and trying to deal with on a case-by-case basis right now.
Great, thanks, Brian. I have a question. I believe I can handle this. Are bars also able to expand in front of vacant storefronts with permission of that business, just like retail food establishments can? Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, bars are only to expand in front of their establishment. They're not to be expanding in front of vacant buildings. So is that correct?
That is correct. In front of their establishment only, not in front of vacant properties.
Great question here. So, and I'll handle this one. Is the 6 feet clearance measured from the edge of the table or the center of the table? So the 6 feet clearance, and folks on the line, correct me if I'm wrong, is measured from the edge of the barrier. So as you can see on this slide, barriers must be erected around the seating area. And so then you measure the 6 feet from that barrier to the building or to the curb. Question, and I believe this would be for Jen. Are there any circumstances in which you could do street closure for just 2 businesses?
Unfortunately not. It takes 3 establishments minimum to close a city street.
I had a question about denials and how to appeal. I'll answer that first and then point to Jen if there's any options there. So we have denied a few permits, a couple of them for a couple different reasons. Permits that are potentially too, as I said, have parking lots that are too far away or have other public safety issues related to similar to that. And again, we also check with the police commander and with the local alderman. So there's not a denial, there's not an appeals process for them. We're happy to tell you, if you want to follow up with us, why it was your permit was denied. There may be an opportunity if it was denied due to input from the local police commander and from the local alderman. There may be an opportunity to work with them to find a solution. We're happy if you follow up to talk a little bit more detail about that. But I will say, if your permit application has been denied in the past, but would now be allowed under these new rules, we encourage you to reapply. You should be reapplying for this. That, you know, for example, if you applied for what would be considered an outdoor patio and you either were denied or canceled your application because we told you you needed an outdoor patio license, please do resubmit an application and we can get that processed as soon as possible. Jen, did I miss anything on that?
That's all correct. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Question, and I believe this is for Brian Gallardo from CDOT. What about if there's pay to park immediately outside a business? Is there any special rules or permission to allow this?
So far, we've been doing our best to work with our finance team to see if we can get some exceptions for any metered parking spaces. There is a limit to that. Depending on how many days you're going to be out there, there may or may not be a fee. If it's just a few days, we've been given a little bit of leeway to not charge for those metered spots. If we're talking about 7 days a week for the next 3 months, that would go beyond the scope of what we can ask to be waived.
Thanks, Brian. And a point of clarification, I believe I misread an earlier question. I had a question about 6 feet table spacing on the sidewalk. The 6 feet table spacing, whether you're on the sidewalk, outdoor patio, wherever it is, it's measured from the edge of the table. So those rules we talked about earlier, 6 feet of outdoor, 6 feet of clearance measured from the edge of the table. I had a question about people that have passed restaurants that barely leave room for a person with a stroller to pass. Want to clarify that this 6 foot clearance rule is a rule for restaurants, for bars, for sidewalk cafes, whatever it is. If you have any location, that is not allowing 6 feet of clearance, please do let us know. That is not allowed. Whether you're a restaurant, whether you're using a sidewalk cafe, whether you're using this, these are really many of the same rules that restaurants already have. Had a question, and Brian Gallardo, maybe you can help with this. Folks are concerned about the weather changing over the next few months with the restrictions of no propane heat lamps or tenting. How will outdoor dining be sustainable? Can you talk a little bit about what the requirements are maybe for, and Jen, I'm not sure if you can help with this as well, around the propane heat lamps or tenting or things like that.
So at this time, and Jen, jump in if I'm saying something wrong here. The rules don't allow for using tents on the public way.
That's correct.
And then
as far as propane heating, I haven't had that question before, so I don't have a response right now, but I can look into it and see if I can get a response that we can send out.
Yep, and I'll put up the communication, where you can send questions to, but I'll add it here as well. ChaiDining@cityofchicago.org is your direct contact, your direct email for things related to this outdoor dining program. Okay. Can we erect a covering on the sidewalk service areas? So again, tents are not allowed on the public right away under this program. Great. For a parking lot outdoor bar, can a customer enter the bar in order to order a drink to be consumed outside if the 6-foot rule is followed? So under the guidelines, you can, if you're outdoor only, you can enter the establishment for things like that, to use the restroom, to enter quickly. We do encourage ordering to go on outside, however. Now you can enter briefly, and so if it's possible to set it up, there really shouldn't be any congregating inside. So if it's possible for customers to order indoors and then consume it outside quickly, that is doable. But we don't recommend that. We do recommend ordering outside. Question, and I believe this could be a question for Jen, and this question does depend on a number of different factors in a number of different cases. What's the average turnaround for restaurants or bars to get approval of the EOD permit once they submit the online application? So assuming we have everything in order and there aren't issues with the application, how soon can we turn that around?
Right. So an application needs to be fully complete before we can share it with the other departments that are part of the review process. That includes OEMC, CPD, CFD, CDOT, and BACP if you're serving alcohol. If the application is fully complete, it's approximately a 5-day turnaround.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Are umbrellas permitted on the sidewalks? My understanding is yes. Jen, do you know? Can you confirm that?
That is correct. Umbrellas are allowed at tables on sidewalks.
Great.
And on the public way.
I do see a couple questions coming in related to outdoor heaters. That's not something that we've had, and as Brian mentioned, please, and that's something that part of why we do consult with the fire department on these. And if you can just send us that question via email, you can use that Chai Dining email I just put, or bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. We do have specific guidance that we give sidewalk cafes related to heaters, and I don't want to misspeak on any of that, and we don't have our sidewalk cafe expert on now. So please send us that email, and we will make sure to get you the information. But ultimately, the rules are the same as they are for sidewalk cafes. So sidewalk cafes are allowed to have some sort of heaters, but I'll have to check to make sure we give you the exact correct guidance there. Okay. I had a question, I believe this is a question for Brian Gallardo. What if a bike share or some other thing that is on the sidewalk is hindering the ability to have 6 feet of clearance? Is it possible to relocate that bike to the other side of the street?
So at this time, we have not relocated any bike racks, whether just standard bike racks or divvy bike racks, for any of the expanded outdoor dining permits. I believe if somebody's applying for a sidewalk cafe through that process, there is a way to request that, but through the through the expanded outdoor dining program, we have not relocated anything so far. We are not permitted to relocate anything so far.
Thanks, Brian. Question, is there a report of all the approved EOD permits in the city? So we're actually working on getting that up, and we're hoping to have it up by the end of the week to have a list of all the approved expanded outdoor dining permits. Again, hoping to have that by the end of the week. We do have a list on our website of all of the street closure locations. That is on our website, but we're looking to get the total EOD permits up by the end of the week. And then this is a question for Brian Knipper from Liquor. For a liquor establishment trying to open in a private parking lot, do they need the city and state permit? All right,
Yes, they're going to need the city and state permits if they're going to be outside and on a parking lot. The reasoning is that they're only licensed for their establishment, and the establishment is usually, if they don't have an outdoor patio, it's the interior only. And when they go outside of that, then they need the special event permits.
Great. And then Brian, if you can just stay on for a second, I have a cafe that has 2 patio tables outside. Can a customer who purchases a cocktail to go open the container and drink it on the patio and leave with it? And before chime in, Brian, just want to make it clear, you should really be treating cocktails to go the same that you would selling beer or anything like that from a liquor store. So if you allow BYOB, if a place allows BYOB, then you could drink a cocktail to go there. But if it's in the public, there's no public consumption. So if you have a patio that's on the public right away, that would not be allowed there. And then Brian, do you have anything else to add there?
No, I think you covered it pretty thoroughly. It's basically you treat it as a packaged good, and that's for off-site consumption.
Great, thank you. We have just a couple minutes left. I know we took a big pause there to answer questions. I want to do a couple other frequently asked questions. Great. And then we'll take a couple minutes to answer the other ones come through. A couple questions we get: can bars be set up outside? So no, even as you're expanding, the drinks should be poured, mixed, etc., inside the licensed establishment. You cannot have entertainment outside, no bands, DJs, other form of entertainment. As I said, you cannot erect a tent in the public right away. And finally, the applicant is responsible for security. Quickly, how to apply. Jen Washington, as I said, from DCASE is on. She's overseeing the initial intake, her and her team, through DCASE, Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. The way to apply is chicago.gov/DCASE. You click on the Special Events Permits, Special Event Permits button. We've also sent out the direct application in numerous different places. It's under the Special Events button because the team that typically processes special events is now being activated to process this. You can find the application with a whole list of those required documents: floor plan or site plan, security plan. Very important to make sure they're ready quickly, certificate of insurance, and then your city and state liquor license application. Particularly your dram shop insurance is very important to allow us to process these, quickly. Finally, I'm going to keep this slide on while we, I believe it's the last slide, yep, while we answer questions, just so you know a little bit about who to reach out to. As I said, Chai Dining at cityofchicago.org is your main place. Brian has his contact information there if you have any liquor license questions. CDOT permit support at cityofchicago.org if you have questions about something traffic related. And then chicago.gov/NBDC for your local Chamber of Commerce or something like that. I'm going to see a couple additional questions come through, and I'll take a couple minutes. I hope folks are okay staying on for just a little bit longer as these questions come through. If I have applied already based on the original rules, which said no alcohol sales after 9 p.m., do we have to adjust the application? That's a great question. If you have an approved expanded outdoor dining permit and we've now changed the liquor curfew rules, you do not need to change your permit. If you already have a license and we have just changed the rules for the liquor curfew, you do not need to get a new permit. Now, if you are looking to operate in a new location because it is now allowed and it didn't used to be allowed, then you should apply for a new application. I see a couple questions come into that. If you just applied recently, you should be fine. Again, feel free to send an email to the Chai Dining email that's up here, or BACP Outreach at cityofchicago.org, and we can help you make any tweaks to your application if you need to. Okay. Can a music venue have entertainment? So under the expanded outdoor dining permit, no entertainment. You can't have entertainment outside as a part of this. Now, music venues can remain open under the Phase 4 guidelines, provided that they're following the performance venue guidelines. And if they serve alcohol only, they should not be serving alcohol inside. Now, if you have any questions about your specific venue, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. But you cannot be having entertainment outside as part of this permit. Jen, is there anything else to add there, or anything I was incorrect about?
No, that's correct. No amplified sound or entertainment outside under the EOD permit.
Thank you, Jen. Great. I believe, let me scroll through. I believe we've answered most of the questions. Again, if we did not get to your question, please send us an email at bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, just to reiterate, there's no entertainment outside. I'm happy to answer kind of specific questions for your specific establishment via email. I want to thank Brian from Liquor, Brian from CDOT, and Jen from DCASE for all of your help with this. Again, please do not hesitate to reach out via email. Just, in conclusion, I want to thank all of you. I know this is an incredibly difficult time right now, especially for bars, taverns, and breweries. So I want to thank all of you for your dedication and resiliency in following the rules during this difficult time. Again, our cases have been going up, but we're hopeful that with these measures in place, we will be looking forward, hopefully soon, to see the cases start going back down. I know we get a lot of questions about when we could hope to expand guidelines again. The threshold that we really have been using and the health department has been using is that 200 cases per day threshold. So I recommend checking out the COVID dashboard to see the most up-to-date numbers there. So again, don't hesitate to follow up with any questions. Thank you all for joining. And thanks again to my colleagues from other departments for helping out today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you.